without further ado, can I pass over to Helena for her presentation? And I would like to have, even though you're all muted, I want a nice warm applause. Wavertree, warm welcome to Helena.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, Rob. That was lovely. I'm just going to share my screen now. Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a success then, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the one thing you're always, the whole thing develops.
Absolutely, absolutely. So hello, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting us to speak this evening. I'm Helena and I'm the archivist and team leader at Liverpool Central Library and Archive. So as Rob indicated, tonight I'm going to talk to you about just some collections that we have, how to access those collections, and then a little bit on how you would research some sources on Wavertree specifically for you as well, as you are the Wavertree Society. I had to do a bit of reading up myself for this one. I'll then pass you over to Sarah, who's one of my colleagues, and she'll talk to you about family history sources. So this is for the people who are not from Liverpool, and I know that there's a few in the audience this evening. So we are the city's archive, and we have records dating back to the 13th century, the earliest record being 1207, right up to the present day, records that are being created, you know, this week, oral histories, people recording their stories. So 13th century to present day. We are based within Central Library in William Brown Street, and this is what's depicted on the screen from our watercolours collection. It's a beautiful historic building that underwent a massive redevelopment in 2013, which cost £50 million. So we do have a state-of-the-art library in the city centre. For those that may be concerned, the original facade, the historic facade, the Picton reading rooms, the Hornby and Oak libraries were untouched. They are just as historic and as beautiful as they were before the redevelopment. But we are very lucky to have such a good archive, you know, a good repository for the archive. It hasn't always been the case in the city. We are an accredited service, which means that we meet all the standards you would expect from a top quality archive service, and that accreditation comes from the National Archives. So for those that haven't visited, we've got the historic facade, and we've also got a really up-to-date modern atrium as you walk into the building. It's absolutely stunning for those that haven't visited us since 2013, and also for those that haven't been able to visit recently because of COVID restrictions. This was just to entice you back into the building. This is me in the archives. We have 15 kilometres of archives which we care for. It's a massive collection spread over 4 floors. So when we ask people to, you know, make an appointment, I'll go over all this later. This is the reason why it is an extensive collection, and it does take us time to retrieve the items from the archive repository. So just to say that our main purpose really is we are the city's memory. So we hold the council records for the city dating back to 1550 with early town books, going up to present day minutes. So that is our main purpose, so to speak. You know, we do look after this corporate memory, but we also obviously collect personal papers, community archives, you name it, school records. And our personal sort of archive collections, our personal papers, are one of the largest sort of areas that we have. So you can have everything from a diary from the Earls of Derby, who sit at Knowsley Hall, through to the diary of a young schoolgirl writing about the May Blitz. It's that varied. We're trying to capture a wide range of voices in the archive. especially you know, voices that maybe have been marginalised or haven't really come across in traditional archive sources. This leads me on to a new exhibition, which we have currently on the archive floor. Oh, sorry. No, let me just talk about the community archive first, because this is a particular interest of mine. I've always been interested in community archives. And when I first started at the record office 20 years ago, my first job was to catalogue the Jewish archive collection, which was extensive. And it's an amazing collection of personal papers, synagogue records, business records, welfare. If you wanted to chart the development of a city and look at a sort of demographic, it's a really important collection, and it was meticulously kept by this sort of Jewish communal archivist over many years. So as well as our sort of more historic sort of community archives like the Jewish archive collection, currently on display we have an organisation that I've been working with for about 3 or 4 years, who have been trying to document the history of Africans in the region through the first project, Africans on Merseyside, and they've moved on to this project, which is the growth of Pentecostal churches, which tells an interesting story. So these are oral histories. These are deposited in the archive in a digital format, and people can listen to them. It's a growth area. It's an area I'm interested in. If people are out there in the audience and want to, or maybe part of an organisation, and they want to capture their own heritage, then I can try and assist with that, help you find funding. Just, you know, drop me an email and I'll try and help. Bringing it back just round from community archives, which I could talk about all night, back round to Wavertree. This is I'm sure I know Mike knows this one, and probably Rob as well. This is a historic map that shows the township of Wavertree in Allerton from 1560, I was going to say 1568. It's not the original. I thought it was. It's not. It's a very good copy. The original is at the National Archives, I believe. This is just as sort of an example of a record that we have for Wavertree, and that's how early it is. You know, it's 1568, and the maps that we have, you know, they span up to sort of modern day. So really, if you wanted to chart the sort of the development of Wavertree, the maps is a really good way to do it. So just a little bit about this map. I believe it was created as part of a dispute over land boundaries between Wavertree and Allerton. And there was commissioners sent to basically walk around and take witness statements, because they said there was a nuisance because there wasn't proper boundaries. A plan was devised and it was submitted to the Chancellor. And from what I gather, those records are held at the National Archives, so you can get a real picture of, well, what were the nuisances? I'd quite like to know what the disputes were. So that's a good source. There's a more of a detailed history of this dispute in Stuart Brown's book, A History of the Manor of Allerton, which I haven't read, but you know, I did have a little glance through it for this presentation. It seemed very comprehensive, obviously. So if anyone wanted to come and have a look at that book, again, you can do that through the archives. We've also got maps of Wavertree from 1770s, showing Wavertree Moss, Wavertree Commons. Anyone interested in that? Again, the map collection's a really good place to start. Some of our really early collections are Wavertree records, such as the Salisbury manuscripts, and which were the Marquess of Salisbury, which included Wavertree court rolls from 1588. Quite difficult to read, I'm not going to lie, but they're a fantastic source, and some people have painstakingly gone through them. We've also got the Wavertree Township records, which show that how Wavertree, the civil administration of the area, before it became part of the city in 1895. It's again a really interesting source about how it was sort of running itself, really. It includes early deeds, land ownership records, tithe records, minute books. So again, you know, an underused resource, I have to say. As well as those really old historic records, we've also got parish records. So if you were wanting to, you know, do your family history, or if you needed a copy of a baptism certificates because you're getting married, or, you know, your daughter's getting married, or your son, or whatever, we'd be a good place to start for that. I've just popped on the screen Church of England, Roman Catholic churches, but we also have non-denomination, non-conformist records. And if you wanted to know what we have in that respect, just drop me an email and I can provide a list. So I've talked about the historic records and the sort of parish records. Another really interesting way to document the area, the history of an area, is through our photographic collections. Where to start with them, there's hundreds of thousands of them that span many different collections. This was just one image that I quite liked from Picton Clock in 1897. It was, for some people, I'm sure you all know this, it was erected by James Picton. And this photograph, as it says, is from about 1897. It was erected in 1884. So it's just slightly later, just slightly earlier than the photograph. I also popped a little old picture of the smallest house in England. I'm saying it's the smallest house. Somebody may know different. That's what it was catalogued as. Is there a smaller house in England? I'd like to know if there is. I'll change the catalogue. This is from, obviously, Wavertree High Street. We've got photographs of lots of public houses in Wavertree, lots of information on places like the Coach Inn, the Coffee House, which is still there, which was a sort of lodging, stables from really early 1754. And a really good source, if you're interested in the pubs of the area, which I have a little interest in myself, is Freddie O'Connor's books, A Pub in Every Corner. A really good source, you know, a nice collection that he's put together. And it really, lots of the photographs come from our collections as well. The local people in the audience will know that the Abbey Cinema has been a source of dispute recently. They were wanting to turn it into a Lidl, all-day Lidl. So it's there has been a bit of a dispute, so I thought I would include that this evening. This is an interior shot. Lots of people may not have seen the interior before because it's been closed for a long time. And anyone interested in the history of the Abbey, another good place to start is Harold Ackroyd's The Picture Palaces of Liverpool. You know, that would be a really good introduction to the history. I should say that this interior shot is from 1939. I couldn't not talk about the Wavertree Mill as well. I've popped a couple of images up. This is Wavertree Mill, I believe, from one of our watercolour collections, the Beatty collection. And it's, to the best of my knowledge, I know that the monarchs had control of the mill from about the mid-15th century through to 1620s. And corn, I believe, was ground at the mill until the 1890s or 1889. And I believe it was demolished in 1916, so it's not been there for a long time. But we certainly have a lot of watercolours that, you know, have captured it in various, sometimes Mike and I had a bit of a discussion about this because I had pulled out a watercolour, but it was nothing like this one. It was quite a different depiction of it. So that's interesting in itself. So just to summarise, lots of the key landmarks, it's another watercolour, lots of the key landmarks, such as Monk's Well, the lockup, and information and images can be found in the city's archives. We also have institutional records for institutions like Olive Mount, which some of you may know was a cottage home, a children's home from 1901. And we've got admission records, discharge records. So anyone maybe doing their family history or just interested in, you know, the life of the people who were at the home, just more about the people who, the young children who were there, can get in touch and we can talk you through access to those records. I popped in one about the garden suburb because it's quite interesting really that it was an experiment in housing reform, which I kind of knew about, but it didn't, you know, I didn't know an awful lot about it. And it was rare really that houses and housing plans, you know, this early, sort of First World War time, were including things like gardens, social spaces, recreational spaces. So I found it quite interesting, the suburb. And there is a thesis that someone has written about the development of the suburb that you can access through the archives as well. And again, lots of photographs, lots of watercolours, which you can look at. I couldn't not mention the mystery because for the whole of lockdown, I think I must have covered the mystery every single day at some point by walking around it. So I had to put this picture because it's fantastic. This is from the Liverpool show, and the mystery hosted the Liverpool show for many years, and we've got a really comprehensive collection of photographs. So if you think you might have been caught on camera, or your relatives, or you know, you may have put on a display, a flibber display, you can come in and look through those photographs. They've only relatively recently been catalogued. A lot of people don't quite know that they're there, but it is a good collection. This is obviously Ken Dodd with a crocodile made out of flowers, which you don't see every day. So for those that don't know, who maybe are not from Wavertree, the mystery was formerly the Grange, and it came about because land was sold off in 1895, but it was sold off for recreational purposes only by an anonymous benefactor. Some people say it was Philip Holt. Now maybe you may have established that, or maybe established someone else. That's certainly who was coming up when I was doing a little bit of digging about it. It immediately apparently got the name of the mystery, and it's stuck to this day. And as I say, the Liverpool show, a big event for the city, and it really is captured in this collection of photographs. So how do you access all these wonderful, wonderful archives? Mainly through the archive search room based at Central Library. We operate pretty much by appointment. Well, we just operate by appointment now, especially with COVID. So I've popped the archive email address on the screen, and also our current opening times. They are changing because of COVID, so it's always useful to keep an eye on the website, but currently it's 6 days a week. When you book an appointment, you'll be asked what you want to look at, and if you tell us that, that's always a help. You can request up to 10 items per visit, and we ask for 48 hours notice, and that's because of the sheer extent of the archives and just the small team that we do the retrievals for it. So how do you find what you're looking for? Well, it's easy for me to say because I'm there every day, but for you, the public, it is a bit harder. We have an online catalogue that sits within the library suite of pages on the council website. And by my own admission, it is not the easiest piece to use. It's quite tricky. We recommend that you use the any text field, pop in some free text searching, you know, Liverpool show, Ken Dodd, Olive Mount. But I'm perfectly aware that what will happen is you will get lots and lots of hits, and it would be quite hard to unpick what it is you want. So I'm not trying to discourage you from using the catalogue. It's a good place to start. I just would like to point out that if you can't find what you're looking for, then please email us and we will try and help you, because we know it's not easy. It's just, you know, it can be tricky. It's the nature of archives, I think, the nature of our website. So you've checked the website, and as I say, email us. We'll do our best. We've got a good team, a knowledgeable team. And if we don't know the answer, we'll try and ask around and find out who does. So when you do visit, this is what you can expect. There is a search room, and we have a scanner. We've got the tables laid out for you. You'll be asked to leave any bags that you have, any food, drink, pens in the lockers, because you are looking at original documents. You can bring in a digital camera, and you can bring in a USB stick, so you can use our really good scanner. That's all free of charge. You will be given a copyright form if you are taking images, and we do sort of try and stress that you are signing the copyright form, so please don't put images on the web, on social media, publish them without permission. We hold a lot of collections that we are not the copyright owner for, so it can, you can end up in quite a lot of trouble. So please do always consult with us over use of any images that you do take. At the moment, like everywhere, we are social distancing. So the room is set for 14 researchers. We're taking 5 at the moment to allow for social distancing. So it's a very safe space. People are asked to wear masks unless they're exempt. If they look at records, they're popped into quarantine after it to make it safe for you, make it safe for the team. So we've made it as safe as possible. I can't think of anything else that we can do, really. A lot of our sources have also been digitised through partnership working with Find My Past and Ancestry. So sources like Parish Records, Cemetery Records, the Workhouse, things that we're getting asked for all the time, we're just not going to survive into the future. They were becoming really fragile, especially the Workhouse records. So we've had them scanned, we've had them digitised, and you can access them for free from those sites, from a Liverpool library. Otherwise, it's usually a subscription that you have to pay if you try to do it from home. So this is a deal that we enter in with them. They get our content, we get free access to all of the city's libraries. We've also got microfilm machines. You can just about see them in the distance in that picture. And to access newspapers, street directories, lots of other sources, that's the only way to do it, because they haven't been scanned and we don't get the originals because they're falling apart. So microfilm is still a big thing in archives. It used to be drop-in, but because of COVID, we've had to make that appointment for the moment. I'm hoping we can change that if restrictions are lifted. So just to finish up, other services that we offer, I know some people can't come out at the moment. Sometimes you've got a tricky inquiry and you've gone as far as you can go with it and you just need help. We do have a research officer called Roger Hull, who's very experienced. There's nothing really that Roger doesn't know how to answer. There is a charge for that service of £25 an hour. We can also digitise items for you for a fee as well. We try and keep that quite low. So if you can't visit, you want to see some documents, we'll try and digitise them for you and not charge you through the roof for it. So as I say, I'm here to help individuals, organisations with their own heritage projects. I can give you advice on that if you want. And lastly, also, we're always open to new deposits. So it's what keeps us relevant. It's what means that we'll have an archive that's actually meaningful for future generations. So if you do think that your organisation or you have archives that are pertinent to the city's collection policy, then get in touch with us. But thanks for listening, everyone. And I'm going to stop sharing and pass over to Sarah, and then we'll take questions at the end.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for that, Helena. That was really intriguing. Yeah, if anyone wants to pop us any questions again in the chat, feel free, and we'll try and answer them as best as we can. So hello everyone. I'm Sarah, and I've been working in the library archives for about 2 years. Oh, apologies, I've not actually shared my screen yet, have I? So let me just do that now. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. Sorry about that. So as I've said, I've been working in the Liverpool Library Archives for about 2 years. I've got a big passion for family history myself, mostly due to the fact that my mum has been researching our family history back to the 16th century. In fact, she's constantly reminding me that my 5 times great-grandfather is actually buried in the former cemetery of St. John's Church, just outside of the library. So it's quite nice to sort of have a bit of heritage so close to where I work. But it also feels a bit strange whenever I walk in to know that information. So I was delighted to be involved in putting together a current exhibition. In fact, you can see it in this photograph here, the exhibition in the slide, which focuses on our records that we have in the archive that are useful to anybody researching family history in Liverpool and the surrounding area. With that in mind, what I'm going to show you in this presentation is what we have available to the family history researcher and genealogist, from the beginner right through to the more advanced researcher. I'll draw upon sources from my own family tree, from my own family history, as well as discuss individuals outside of the family. I'm going to begin with the basic nuts and bolts of family history research, such as birth, marriage and death records, more commonly known as BMD, the records that deal with dates, names and factual information, right through to the more unusual records that we have, which may not seem immediately relevant to a family historian, but can really add a lot of character and richness to your family history. For example, it could be the wonderful presentation currently on display of Blackburn House School's Scenes from School Life, which was created by the school's pupils in 1940 and presented to the headmistress as a retirement gift. That's a record that we could look at a little bit later on.
See it? Oh, yeah.
Thank you. So let's start with the basic information that every family history researcher needs to begin with: the birth, marriage and death registers, or BMD records. In the Liverpool archives, the BMD records cover the period 1837, when civil registration of births, marriages and deaths started in England and Wales, to 2004. This shouldn't be confused with church registers, with church registers of baptisms, marriages and burials, also known as parish records, which preceded and continued alongside civil registration after 1837. We can talk about those records a little bit later on. So the index provides the information you'll usually need to obtain an ancestor's birth, marriage or death certificate. You can see an example here on the slide of my ancestor, Sarah Allport, plus a transcript. As you might already know, we don't hold certificates here in the archive, not birth, marriage or death certificates anyway, but you can purchase them. To actually purchase them, you'll need to contact the Liverpool registrar at the Liverpool Register office at St George's Hall, or there's also the national office in Southport, basically with your information. The indexes can be viewed at the archive on microfiche, which can ordinarily be accessed in our public area outside the search room. The best way really though to access BMD records is online through Ancestry and Find My Past databases, as Helena briefly mentioned before. These have, these have more current listings up to 2017. These sites do charge for their use via subscription. However, there is a free online access to these databases in our library, basically on our computers, whether that's in Central Library or any of our branch libraries. Free BMD information is also available via a website called Free BMD and also Lancashire BMD, which again, these can be accessed on our computers. It's also useful to know that the archive holds other BMD indexes on microfiche, not included in national registration, such as overseas, army and consular returns. Indeed, finding a name in the index can sometimes be easier said than done, because names can be misspelled or come with spelling variations. The next important records I'd like to talk about are our national census returns. They're amongst the most useful sources of information for local and family historians. They provide some valuable and detailed information on households. The first national census was taken in 1801, but gives more extensive details after the 1841 census. As you'll probably be aware, a census has been taken every 10 years, except 1941, due to the Second World War. However, there is a wartime England and Wales register, which was conducted in 1939, which is just as valuable as the census. It was actually made available to the public. To guarantee confidentiality, information from the census is not always released for 100 years, is not released for 100 years. Censuses for England and Wales and Scotland can be found online via Ancestry and Find My Past databases. Again, it's useful to mention that these sites are available for free on our computers. We also hold microfiche copies for Liverpool and some outlying areas, including Wirral. These cover the dates 1841 through to 1901. The 1921 census is due to be released in January 2022 on Find My Past. To illustrate census information in a little bit more detail, you can see on the slide another example from my own family history of the 1901 census from the Edge Hill area of Liverpool. It gives the name of my ×2 great-grandparents, Alfred J. Allport and Laurie Yates, their address, 37 Barnett Street, West Derby, their children's names, ages and occupations, where they were born, and any disabilities that they may have. Kind of asked it rather archaically, I might add, but it was quite typical to the time period. I think it's important now to turn to Parish Records. These are an invaluable source of information for family historians, especially because, as mentioned before, they predate 1837 registration. We hold the Church of England and Roman Catholic records, as well as registers from non-conformist churches and some Jewish synagogues, as Elena mentioned before. These records give information about christenings, marriages, and sometimes burials, although the level of detail contained within them varied over according to date. Early registers are held limited information and often depended on the thoroughness of the incumbent and parish clerk. We hold original registers, however. Most of our parish records are now actually available on Ancestry or alternatively in the library on microfilm. So let's take a quick look firstly at our Church of England records, which you can already see on the slide here. So to illustrate an early register, the second picture in the middle, picture number 2, I don't know if you can see my mouse if I move it here. It's a baptism and marriage register from St Nicholas's Parish Church in Liverpool, 1659 to 1673. Picture number 1 on the left is of the church itself. Not only do the entries give basic details, but it also uses abbreviations in some of the entries, and the spellings given are of Middle English period, which can confuse some researchers. To the right of the slide are a few later examples of CV parish registers. The top picture, number 3, is a band's register and is of my 5 times great-grandfather and great-grandmother, who were married at St Nicholas's Church in Liverpool, the same church I mentioned a little bit before. And at the bottom right, sort of the bottom right register, picture number 4, if you can see. Again, I'll move my mouse there. This is of my late great-grandfather and great-grandmother who were married at St Dunstan in Edgehill, 1920. Next, let's take a quick look at the Catholic records that we have, as they do differ slightly to our Church of England registers. The important thing to mention here is to note that basically the standard details given in these registers are of Latinized form. Although we do have English transcripts needed, which are needed if you are reading the text and if you need any help with that. In the centre of the slide, picture number 3, is one of our early registers, Catholic registers, of St Swithin's Church. It contains a list of baptisms and marriages from 1757 to 1769. Prior to 1842, records were generally kept in small, flimsy-looking notebooks, and details are quite simple, but includes names, dates of births, and dates of the events. To the left, picture number 2 is of a later record, a burial record for St Anthony's Church, 1833 to 1840. Picture number 1 is a photo of the church itself. I'd like to draw your attention though to the 2 records on the right-hand side. The top, picture number 4, is a baptism record for St Swithin's in 1902, and it's particularly interesting because it details the names of an individual, Helena Butchard, not a family member. Underneath the record, there's been a later addition added, that of a reference to Helena, who eventually got married in the parish of St Paul's in West Derby in 1937. Catholic churches would do this in order to keep a tight record of your status. Picture number 5 below is of a marriage record to Jacob McKenna in May 1937. What's really good to mention too about Catholic baptism records is that they include the mother's maiden name, a golden key to tracing your female line of ancestors. Lastly, it's good to mention how not all records have been digitised online yet. For instance, Ancestry only holds Catholic registers up till 1933. Newer records then do have to be consulted within our archive. They can be located either on using the online catalogue, as again Helena mentioned a little bit about it before, or using the index in the search room. Some of our records may be closed due to data protection, so if you're unsure, you can always drop us a line, email us. If you are in the library, you can pop up to the desk and we can answer your query about any records that we have in parishes. So BMD records, census records and parish registers really are your starting point for research. Others might also include electoral and voters registers and also burial registers, which we hold in the archive. But due to timing, I probably won't go into these today, but that's not to disregard their importance. The next set of records I think that deserve a mention then, as you can see on the slide, but are probably overlooked a little as insights into family history, are school records. Records that we have in the archive include admission registers, withdrawal registers, discharge registers, and also logbooks. You can also see some examples in the slide here. Please note, obviously, some of the records which are less than 100 years old may be closed to public access due to personal sensitive information, especially because it's around children previously as well. The left, picture number 1, as you can see there, is an admission and withdrawal register from Arnott Street School in Liverpool, February 1899 to August 1902. These particular registers are written in quite a formalised and standardised way, so they can be relatively easy to decipher. The right, picture number 2, is of a school logbook for Breckfield Infant School in Liverpool, September 1939 to August 1940, so quite interestingly during the war period. Over 80 pupils from Breckfield were evacuated to Aberystwyth in Wales. These logbooks, written in a similar format to a diary entry, give detail of the school's daily life, briefly including the behaviour and health and well-being of some of the children. You might also find other bits of information related to the news of the war, and in true British style, even the weather. Some names of staff, children and foster parents are mentioned, but in the majority of cases, a lot of the names of the children will not be given. And it's fair to say that these records are largely good for context, yet they're absolutely fascinating to view. A last thing I'd like to mention regarding school records, and one that I brought up earlier in the introduction, is this wonderful retirement presentation. It was created and presented by the children of Blackburn House High School for their headmistress, Miss Ashwell, during World War II in 1940, so again, war period. It's perhaps one of my favourite archive finds, actually. I absolutely love it every time I go through it. It's so bright and colourful. The handmade watercolour images depict scenes from the pupils' lives, from the games that they played, to their hobbies, chores and classes. It's just really colourful and perhaps exemplifies a little of that sort of blitz wartime spirit in the early 1940s. Indeed, a lot of during this time period, it must have been quite terrifying and confusing for the children who were forced to evacuate from their family homes, not really knowing if they'd have a home to return to, and not knowing whether the family members would be killed in action in the home front or in military battle. But like with logbooks, these records are not hugely informative in terms of individuals, but it does offer a lot of context and charm to family history. The next collection within our archive I'd like to discuss are our workhouse records, as they too can provide invaluable information to your ancestors. Because Liverpool's workhouses eventually became hospitals, the changeover from the workhouse to hospital was a gradual one. Researchers should be aware that some of the hospital collections contain records of people who were admitted as workhouse inmates. And in particular, the records for Sefton General, Mill Road, Newsham General Hospitals, as a result, include workhouse and admission and discharge registers. For family history, our Brownlow Hill Liverpool workhouse records are quite useful and cover the dates 1841 to 1928. You can see an image here of the workhouse at the very top of Brownlow Hill. Includes admission and discharge registers, religious creed registers, which records the person's denomination, and registers of births and deaths within the workhouse. For instance, one particular record for Liverpool Workhouse, which is fascinating, is a baptism record, which I'll show here, of the workhouse church, as it records the details of foundlings. So these are infants who were discovered abandoned in the street, usually due to social pressures. The children would basically be taken under the care of the workhouse and baptised in the chapel, given a Christian name, as they were usually nameless, and a surname which was related to the street that they were found. This particular workhouse baptism record can be accessed on our microfilm in the archive, but it isn't actually available online at the moment, although it has been indexed by the website familysearch.org. So again, it just demonstrates how important our archive can be in terms of seeing a lot of the original records. The second image in the middle is an example of Liverpool apologies, I'll go back. So this second image in the middle, just below Brownlow Hill Workhouse, is an admission and discharge register, and relates to my times for great-grandmother Elizabeth Allport, who went into the workhouse in 1847 with a 5-year-old son, Edward, and 5-month-old daughter, Jane. As you might see in image 3 at the bottom, sadly, Jane died in the workhouse as an infant, something which sadly was quite common. Brownlow Hill House was later demolished in 1931 to actually make way for the Roman Catholic Cathedral, which now stands today. So these workhouse registers were designed to look quite foreboding, to deter people from using them. So I found the images of them, such as the Brownlow Hill example here, rather eerie to look at. So as mentioned, these admission and discharge registers are held in our archive, but they're also available now on Find My Past under the heading Liverpool Workhouse Registers. Again, it's good to point out that they are free to access on our library computers. Many have been microfilmed by us too. Again, any records under 100 years old that contain sensitive information are closed due to data protection. So the last set of records to look at, and perhaps one of our more prized collections, are the Rainhill Asylum Records. Rainhill Asylum was one of the largest asylums in Lancashire and opened in 1851. It was subsequently enlarged several times, and in 1887, an annex was opened for a further 1,066 patients. It came about just after the 1845 Lunacy Act set about reforming the care of mental health patients. By the end of the 20th century, the site covered was huge, covering almost 232 acres. Perhaps surprisingly, the asylum didn't actually close until 1991. Today, there are no remains left of it at all. The archive for Rainhill is quite extensive and complex. The two main sources of information that we have are the admission registers, the admission papers, and also the case books, which give detailed information on the psychiatric diagnosis of the patient's status, as well as their personal histories and backgrounds. Some later case books also have images of the patients, sometimes with before and after shots. So basically shots when they were quite ill, and then after shots when they were healthier. Another general, so as you can see here, a general example of a casebook and photograph of an individual called Thomas Bagnall. In this particular casebook, you'll discover his name, age, educational level, that he could read and write, his social status, and sensitive information regarding his mental health. Another general example here is of a lady called Alice Forrester, showing you a mental health state. Sometimes the asylums even recorded details such as the exact measurements of eyes, throats and ears, physical examinations upon arrival, and their general temperaments and character. So caution is advised when looking at these notes, as it might seem quite intrusive and quite crude by modern standards. You can see further examples here relating to Alice Forrester's casebook, showing you her personal history, height and weight, body temperature, hair and eye colour. Towards the end of these records, you'll usually get to find out whether the patient recovered, as in Alice's case, or whether they were admitted elsewhere, or basically what happened to them and whether they were discharged and able to go back home, as did Alice. As mentioned above, these records can be quite shocking and very explicit in how they dealt with, they describe a patient's state of health, mental health. There is a paper catalogue and an index of the records in the search room to help you see what we have available, or you can view the catalogue online. So we've come to an end of this talk. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it really interesting and useful for you. I'll close with a few images here of my own family history, which always inspires me when conducting my own family history research. So thank you very much.
No.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Right, let me get to that. Right. Well, many thanks, both Helena and Sarah, for that. I think you've sort of whetted the appetite for those of us who want to know more and how to go about it. And clearly, we're proud of the city and the amazing records that it does have. I know from my own personal thing, I've been involved in some of the community archives that you've shown very earlier on. But enough of me. We've got some questions that have come up in the chat room, and the first one is from our members up in Montreal, and indeed I certainly know that Martin was, you might not want to know it from Wavertree, but actually where the house was just in the bounds of Wavertree, linking in with the Allerton border, which you talked about earlier, Helena. But his wife, Elena, has asked, and it's quite interesting because it just shows the links that Liverpool has got worldwide. Elena's dad served in the Greek Merchant Navy during the Second World War. And what Elena wants to know is, are there any records of the ships that sailed at that time? And if so, we might be able to find out if her dad, in fact, did sail on the ships during the early on in 1941. We know that he went up to Glasgow, which obviously has links to you, Helena, but where would be able to look for that?
There is crew lists, which, sorry, my internet connection's a little bit unstable at the moment. Was he a passenger or was he working on the ships?
He was a crew member. He was part of the merchant team.
He was actually captain, I think.
Yeah, he was ship's captain, I think, from 1942 on to the end of the war. I know that he served in the Merchant Navy, and then he was recalled to the Royal Navy in 1943 till the end of the war. But I was wondering if there would ever be records of people who were part of the war effort, but not actually the Republicans.
There is crew lists, and the best way to access them is through the National Archives or through Ancestry have them as well, and Find My Past, I believe. So that would be your first place to see if you can find a mention of him on particular ships as a member of the crew. If you were looking at his time in Liverpool, it's a bit tricky because he probably didn't have a permanent residence. So he's unlikely to appear in, say, street directories, because that tends to be head of house.
We believe he was staying at Atlantic House on at least one occasion. Yeah,
it's a tricky one. If he was just a boarder, so to speak, he's not, and it's too, if it's Second World War, it's obviously too late for the census. So even if he was sort of present on census night for a particular census, you may have been lucky that way. So it is a bit tricky, and he's likely to have been unregistered to vote, so it rules out voters' registers as well. So I'd say your crew lists are a good starting point. But just to say that I have got a leaflet on Merchant Seaman Records. It's a lot more comprehensive than I can tell you over the chat tonight. So if you want, if you email archives@liverpool.gov.uk, we will send you a leaflet with the Merchant Seaman. It's actually specifically for this type of inquiry. So we can send you a copy of that.
Thank you.
Good. We've got another question, and it's quite interesting because you're talking about schools and workhouses, but are there any archives with prison records?
Oh, since I've started, everyone's always asked, where is Walton Jail Records? Where are they? And I would love to be able to answer it. Walton Jail, I'd love to find those records. I've heard all sorts of mythical stories about where they might be. Prison records generally, no, we don't hold them. The National Archives, again, would be a better place to try for that. But no, I think it would probably fill up our archives if we do have magistrates' records,
right?
Well, sort of court records up to about 1970s. Lots of them are closed. You can get access via the magistrate. some of them are open. So we do have court records, but actual prisons, no. But I'd love to know if Walton Jail records ever turn up. If anyone's got them in their loft or
right.
Yeah.
Pertaining to a little bit of Wavertree, and it covers the other question about large company records, and one of our members, Rod Brandon, and he was thinking of Patton and Calvert and Co. in Binns Road, which obviously Wavertree. Are there such things as company records that you hold?
Yeah, I know we've got stuff on Patton Calvert. I don't know off the top of my head what we've got, but it's certainly, that's the sort of thing that you could try the catalogue for. If you have no luck, definitely email us and we will have a dig around. It might be that those records aren't catalogued. But yeah, company records. For example, we've got Ogden Tobacco Factory, which is a massive collection of, it includes everything: cigarette cards, personnel records, wage books, minute books, massive company records, Crawford's Biscuit Factory. Yeah, lots and lots of smaller businesses as well. But yeah, with regards to the Peyton Calvert, get in touch with us and we can advise on that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's really helpful. Mike Chitty has put in the digital versions of the Gores Liverpool directories, and the annual one used to be available at the city libraries, but aren't anymore. Are they still available in some way from the Central Library or from your department?
No, and Mike, I would be interested in a conversation about that, because they were, when I first started, there was people who came in and digitised them. I think they were part of Liverpool University. And we may have had CD-ROMs for some years at some point in the sort of distant past, but certainly in recent years of site that has all of the street directories on them. There's little pockets some years, but there just isn't a website where you can go on and sort of search all of the street directories. I'm hoping Ancestry or somebody picks this up as a project for us. Yeah. But yeah, no, we haven't got them digitally, and it is a real, it's actually becoming a real problem for us, to be honest. So,
and we've got a question at the city collection policy. You mentioned that early on. Where can that be found?
Yeah, if you email us, it used to sit on our website, but they've streamed it back, and a lot of those types of documents have been taken down, but we can send it on request. So just email the archives. It will probably come through to me and I'll send you a copy of it.
Right. Yeah. And for people who unfortunately haven't yet been to the Central Library and just think, well, it's just another big building filled with books, I implore you to go along and have a look at the atrium. Even if you don't do anything else, it's just spectacular, as you show from the photographs, and then make your way up to, is it still the 4th floor where your office is, Alida?
On the 3rd floor now.
Make your way up there, and it's just fantastic. It's a great building now, and actually I'm sorry the International closed, because I used to like the International Library, and now it's children's section, is it not?
Became the Children's Library.
Yeah,
that became the it was closed for a long time, which was a shame, because they said they couldn't open it because of the stairs. It was a real shame. Been open for years.
Yeah, it's. I like the International. Has anybody else got a question they'd like to put into the chat room, or even venture to speak out? Because I think we've had a really great meeting. An hour of just putting our dabbling with what is available, because the amount of information out there for our use, and I think everybody here sees the passion that Helena and Sarah, and obviously her all the staff put into this, and the pleasure I think that they get out when they can find something that's helped somebody manifest itself, what's come over tonight. And with, like every talk, even if we get one aspect out of it and it comes to a use, then I can assure Helena and Sarah that it's been well worth your while spending time which is outside your work time. No, you know, so that's why we're indebted for that you've come along this evening. I mean, it's not your normal work hours, so we're absolutely indebted. That I'm pleased that you've done so and fulfilled an ambition of the society to have this talk about how to get how to do it properly and how to look at our ancestry, both community and individual. I certainly know that we've got Florence looking at. Florence has delved into it and as a mine of information, and when Florence does come back, I'm sure she'll be coming up to the 3rd floor and speaking to you, Helena and Sarah.
Yeah.
And she'll be welcome back.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with that, I just, you know, I really want to thank you for a terrific talk. And if we could, again, show our appreciation by having the digital applause, but it is resounding. I could
thank you, everyone.
It's deafening and it's much appreciated. Many thanks, and I will be in, and I'll see if we can help our friends in Montreal with that ship, and you know, and I'll come in anyway. I'll in person with the mask on and talk with you. And again, I thank you everybody for listening in and for appreciating what's been told to us. It's good to see everybody. Who knows when we can meet for real? Your guess is as good as mine. I'm hoping something perhaps by the end of the year we will be able to meet in our community room at Olive Mount Community Centre, because it deserves to be used as well as we need to be there to see people. So again, Helena and Sarah, many thanks for a lovely talk.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Goodbye to everybody, please.
Lovely.
Go home safely. That's what we do.